A Japanese billionaire laughed when he said, "Solve my puzzle and $500 million is yours." But when a black maid from Houston sent in her answer, the entire world went silent. They say every story starts with a choice, but this one started with a challenge. When tech mogul Toshiro Tanaka stood on stage in downtown Tokyo, surrounded by a storm of flashing cameras and reporters, nobody really paid attention to what he said at first. The man was known for his theatrics, holographic dancers, robotic assistants, and outrageous statements that dominated headlines for a week before vanishing into thin air. Before we continue, tell us where in the world you are watching from. Drop it in the comments below. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful content like this. But that day, he said something no one expected. Solve it, and $500 million is yours. The crowd laughed. Some even applauded, certain they were witnessing another elaborate marketing stunt for his company's new artificial intelligence system. But Toshiro wasn't smiling. He placed a sheet of paper on the podium, covered in a chaotic web of strange symbols and patterns. To most, it looked like nonsense. A random mix of numbers, ancient characters, and geometric shapes. Every great mind will fail, he said, his voice calm, almost arrogant. This puzzle cannot be solved by logic alone. It demands understanding. The internet exploded that night. News outlets ran with headlines like, "Japanese billionaire offers $500 million for impossible puzzle," and "Tanaka's madness, genius, or gimmick." Forums lit up with mathematicians and programmers tearing into the code, debating whether it was even real. Thousands of brilliant people tried. None came close. But halfway across the world, in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Houston, Texas, a woman named Elena would hear about it while scrubbing the floor of a guest bathroom. Her radio was old, the sound fuzzy, but she caught enough to make her pause. $500 million, she whispered to herself, leaning on her mop handle. That's insane. For a second, she let out a soft, tired laugh. She had no business thinking about things like that. She cleaned houses for a living. People like her didn't solve billionaire riddles. But there was something about the voice clip they played on the radio. The arrogance in Toshiro's tone stuck with her, almost like a personal dare. And maybe that's where the story truly began. But in that quiet house in Houston, where a maid with tired hands and a sharp mind felt something stir deep inside her. Curiosity, the kind that refuses to go away. But what she didn't know was that her name would soon be on every news channel in the world. Elena wasn't born lucky, but she was born curious. At 35, her life looked nothing like the one she had dreamed of back in college. Once, she had sat in a lecture hall at a prestigious university, solving complex equations faster than her classmates, imagining a future designing machines that could change the world. But that dream ended the year her mother got sick. Medical bills piled up like mountains, and life forced choices she was never ready to make. She left school, came home, and started cleaning houses. One house turned into three into six. Before she knew it, she was running her own small cleaning business, driving around in a faded blue minivan with a cracked windshield and a stack of invoices on the passenger seat. Her clients liked her. She was quiet, respectful, and never pried. But she was sharp, the kind of woman who noticed when a picture frame was off by a single degree or when a rug was misaligned by half an inch. She didn't say much, but she saw everything. Her favorite house to clean belonged to a retired linguistics professor who had recently moved to Houston. The house had polished hardwood floors, tall windows, and shelves filled with books in dozens of languages. Elena didn't understand most of the titles. Sometimes she'd pause while dusting to trace the foreign characters with her finger. She liked the way they felt, like keys to forgotten worlds. Every evening when she got home to her small one-bedroom apartment, she'd make tea and open her old laptop. It was slow, missing a few keys, and the battery barely lasted an hour. but it was her window. She would spend her nights solving logic puzzles online, not for any prize, but for the simple thrill of finding order in chaos. Patterns made sense to her. They were a comfort in a world that rarely offered any. Her friends teased her for it. "Girl, you cleaned for 12 hours straight and you still want to stare at numbers?" Her neighbor Maria would laugh. Elena would just shrug. "Patterns are honest," she'd say. "They don't pretend to be something they're not." Maria would roll her eyes. "Patterns don't pay the bills either." They'd laugh. But Elena knew deep down that her mind still craved more, as if a part of her refused to let go of the person she used to be. But sometimes life has a strange way of remembering you, even when you've forgotten yourself. Toshiro Tanaka didn't grow up rich. He built his empire with his bare hands, sharp instincts, and an ego large enough to fill the boardroom of Tanaka Dynamics, the Tokyo-based company that made him one of the most powerful men in Asia. To his investors, Toshiro was a visionary, a man living 10 years in the future. To his critics, he was a narcissist who believed the world revolved around his own genius. Both were right. He'd spent years chasing perfection, pushing his engineers to design machines that could think, not just follow commands, but interpret, reason, even improvise. When he launched Project Nexus, a neural AI designed to mimic human intuition, he believed he'd finally reached that frontier. But something went wrong. The AI produced results that even his own team couldn't explain. It generated patterns where none should exist, formulas that defied known mathematical rules. So, in one of his most bizarre press conferences, Toshiro turned a glitch into a spectacle. He claimed the AI had generated a riddle, one so advanced that only a mind capable of true understanding could solve it. Then he made his announcement. Solve it, and $500 million is yours. It was madness, but it was profitable madness. Stocks soared. Traffic on the company's website shattered records. Universities and private think tanks began competing, desperate to prove their brilliance. Toshiro enjoyed the chaos. He'd watch videos of professors debating his puzzle, laughing to himself over a glass of expensive whiskey. In his mind, this was art. The world was dancing to his tune, but privately, Toshiro was a lonely man. His empire was filled with people who feared him, not respected him. His assistants came and went, none lasting long under his impossible standards. Even his own family had distanced themselves, tired of living in his shadow. One night, his assistant Yumi entered his office. "Sir," she asked carefully. Toshiro smirked, not looking up from his desk. "They could. I'd be the first to know." He paused, then added, "Don't worry. Humanity still has a long way to go." Yumi hesitated. "And if they do?" He finally looked up, his eyes sharp and cold. "Then I'll meet them myself." He didn't mean it as a promise, more as a joke, but fate has a habit of listening when arrogance speaks too loudly. And across the ocean, someone was already holding the key he thought no one could ever find. The world didn't sleep for days after Toshiro's announcement. You couldn't scroll online without seeing it. The strange puzzle plastered across every social platform. Reddit threads turned into intellectual battlegrounds. YouTube channels popped up overnight, each promising the real solution. Some claimed it was a hoax. Others swore they were seconds away from cracking it. Mathematicians at MIT live-streamed their attempts. A physicist from Stanford went viral when he threw his hands up in frustration on camera after realizing one of the formulas looped back on itself endlessly. Even a 12-year-old in London claimed he had figured out half of it, and yet TV hosts joked about it. News anchors speculated about Toshiro's motives. Was it marketing? Was it art? Was it some kind of social experiment? Everyone had an opinion. Meanwhile, in Houston, Elena only heard about it in passing. A client's teenage son was watching a YouTube breakdown of the puzzle while she was dusting the living room. She paused for a moment, her eyes drawn to the screen. The puzzle was there, a square divided into sections with ancient characters in one corner, a string of prime numbers in another, and a sequence that looked oddly familiar. Looks like a mess to me. The boy laughed. They say it's impossible. Elena smiled faintly. Everything's impossible until someone figures it out. He shrugged. You think you could? She didn't answer, just kept dusting. But her mind stayed on that image long after she left the house. That night, over leftover pasta, she pulled up the puzzle on her old laptop. The web page took nearly 2 minutes to load, but when it finally did, she stared at it like she was meeting an old friend. Something about it felt right. Not the symbols themselves, but the pattern underneath. She reached for a notebook and started scribbling lines, shape, ratios. She couldn't explain why, but the logic felt deeply familiar. It reminded her of something she'd studied years ago, an algorithm used in modeling natural systems. Hours slipped by without her noticing. The tea went cold. Her pencil broke twice, but for the first time in years, she felt completely alive. But puzzles have a strange way of revealing more than just answers. Sometimes they expose the person solving them. By the third night, Elena couldn't think about anything else. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the puzzle's strange lines rearranging themselves behind her eyelids as if it were alive, teasing her to come back. She worked during the day as usual, same houses, same rooms, but something had changed. She'd find herself pausing mid-task, muttering equations under her breath. At one house, an older client, Mrs. Gable, noticed her distraction. You okay, dear? You've wiped that same counter 4 times already. Elena blinked. Oh, sorry, ma'am. Just thinking. Mrs. Gable smiled kindly. Thinking about what? Elena hesitated, embarrassed. That puzzle, the one that the billionaire made. Mrs. Gable laughed. Oh, that nonsense. My grandson's been glued to his phone trying to solve it. Says if he wins, he'll buy me a private jet. Elena smiled politely, but her mind was already elsewhere. Later that night, she sat at her small kitchen table again. The notebook was already full of scribbles and arrows, connecting ideas that would make no sense to anyone but her. The lamp buzzed faintly, and the sound of distant traffic from the street outside drifted through the cracked window. She stared at one of the symbols, a spiral. At first glance, it seemed random, but then she remembered a lecture from years ago about the Fibonacci sequence and how it appears in nature. From the petals of a flower to the spiral of a galaxy, she flipped to a fresh page and began matching each character based on its structural components. Slowly, the chaos started to take shape. Her phone buzzed. A message from Maria. You still working on that thing? Girl, you're obsessed. Elena typed back. Just a little longer? I think I see something. Maria replied with a laughing emoji and went silent. Elena leaned forward, her heart pounding. Each time she drew a line, more pieces connected. The puzzle wasn't random at all. It was a pattern of balance and reflection, like 2 mirrors facing each other, the kind of structure only someone who understood both logic and nature could see. And suddenly, it clicked. The key wasn't math, it was harmony. The riddle wasn't asking what the answer was. It was asking who could understand its purpose. She sat back stunned, whispering to herself, oh my God. It's not about solving it, it's about seeing it. But she didn't know that by morning, that single realization would set off a chain reaction that would change her life forever. By the next evening, Elena's apartment looked like the inside of a detective's office. Pages covered the table, the counter, and even the floor, filled with notes, arrows, and sketches connecting one pattern to another. She hadn't eaten much and had barely slept, but her eyes burned with that rare kind of focus that happens only when your mind knows you are close to something big. Outside, rain tapped lightly against the window, the kind of steady sound that makes time feel slower. She didn't even notice when the power flickered for a moment. Her entire world had shrunk down to a single sheet of paper. At exactly 11:42 p.m., she circled a cluster of symbols near the center of the puzzle. To anyone else, they'd look random, but to her, they represented equilibrium, the point where all forces in the system found balance. she whispered. It's not a problem. She ran her fingers through her hair, grabbed her notebook, and wrote down a single word. The word was harmony. Her eyes widened. She flipped through her notes, scanning for anything that could confirm it. The puzzle's final phrase, a string of characters near the bottom, suddenly made sense. It translated to, the center is the answer. Harmony, center, connection, understanding. Her hands trembled. That's it, she whispered. Still, part of her couldn't believe it. This was Toshiro Tanaka's challenge, something the brightest minds in the world couldn't solve. Who was she to think she could? But she took a deep breath, wiped her hands, and logged into the official challenge website. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting for her to type. She entered one word, harmony. Then she clicked submit. The page froze for a few seconds, then displayed a message. Your answer has been received. Verification in progress. She stared at it, her heart pounding. For a moment, she laughed quietly to herself. I can't believe I actually did it. Her laughter faded when her phone buzzed. An email had just popped up. Tanaka Dynamics, urgent confirmation request. Her hand shook as she opened it. Your submission has triggered a positive response from our system. Please confirm your identity and location for live verification. She just sat there, frozen, her reflection staring back at her from the dark laptop screen. But across the ocean, in a skyscraper lit up against the Tokyo skyline, Toshiro Tanaka had just been alerted, and for the first time in years, he had no idea what to think. 2 days later, Toshiro sat in his private office on the 56th floor that reflected the city lights below. The air was tense. His assistant, Yumi, stood near the door, clutching a tablet, her eyes flicking nervously between him and the screen. Are you saying, Toshiro asked slowly, that the person who solved it is a maid? Yumi swallowed. Yes, sir. From Houston, Texas. Her name is Elena Washington. He leaned back in his chair, half smiling, half incredulous. That's impossible. The system verified the answer twice. No one else even came close. Her solution triggered the AI's recognition sequence. Harmony, he murmured. She wrote harmony? The word lingered in the air like an echo. His arrogance gave way to silence. Not anger, not disbelief, but something deeper, confusion. Prepare a live conference, he said finally. I want to meet her publicly. Back in Houston, Elena's life had turned upside down overnight. News vans were parked outside her apartment building. Strangers shouted her name when she stepped outside to get the mail. Maria stood guard near the door, swatting away journalists with a broom. Girl, you better say something soon before they start digging through your trash, she said. Elena sat at her table, her hands clasped. I didn't mean for any of this. I just wanted to see if I could do it. Her phone rang again, a Japanese number this time. The voice on the other end was calm, formal. Ms. Washington, this is Tanaka Dynamics. Mr. Tanaka would like to speak with you live. Are you available in 1 hour? She hesitated. I guess so. An hour later, her laptop screen filled with the image of a broadcast studio in Tokyo. Toshiro Tanaka sat at a sleek black desk, perfectly composed, but his expression was unreadable. Ms. Washington, he said through the translator, you have done what no one else in the world could do. You solved my riddle. Elena took a shaky breath. I just followed what made sense. Toshiro tilted his head slightly. And what made sense to you? She hesitated, then said softly, the puzzle wasn't about intelligence. It was about understanding. Machines can calculate, but they don't feel. The answer was harmony because that's what connects reason and nature. You built an AI to think like a human, but you forgot the one thing that makes us human. The room went quiet. Even the translator paused before repeating her words in Japanese. Toshiro's eyes dropped to the table. For once, he didn't have a clever response. He simply nodded. You're right. Then, almost reluctantly, he smiled. The first genuine smile he had shown in years. Congratulations, Ms. Washington. You've not only won the challenge, you've reminded me why I created it in the first place. Her voice trembled. I wasn't trying to prove anything. He nodded again. That's exactly why you did. Within hours, the internet exploded. Clips of their exchange spread everywhere. Headlines read, Black Maid outsmarts Japanese billionaire, and the human who beat the machine But for Elena, the noise didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet that followed, a quiet filled with peace. But sometimes the loudest stories are the ones that begin after the cameras turn off. For weeks after the broadcast, Elena's name was everywhere. TV anchors debated her unlikely genius. Talk shows invited her to speak, and companies she'd once cleaned for suddenly called her Miss Washington instead of the Maid. She turned down most interviews. Fame wasn't what she wanted. Peace was. Toshiro Tanaka, on the other hand, kept his word. The $500 million prize was wired to her account, though Elena didn't believe it until the bank called to verify. When she finally saw the balance, she just sat there staring, whispering, "That can't be real." Maria screamed loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Girl, you better not be joking." Elena laughed, tears in her eyes. "I'm not, but I still feel like me." "Yeah," Maria said, grinning, "just richer." A few days later, Elena received an envelope in the mail. No return address, just her name written in precise, careful handwriting. Inside was a letter and a small hand-carved wooden pendant shaped like a spiral. "Ms. Washington, the greatest puzzles are not meant to be solved, but understood. You reminded me that humanity isn't measured by logic or wealth, but by compassion. Never forget what made you see what others couldn't." Toshiro Tanaka. She held the pendant for a long time, smiling quietly. Elena didn't move to a mansion or buy designer clothes. She bought her mother a new home, paid off her debts, and started a small community learning center in Houston, a place where kids and adults could come to learn math, science, and coding for free. She named it the Harmony Lab. Reporters came once in a while, curious to see what the maid who beat a billionaire was doing with her fortune. She always gave the same answer. "I didn't beat anyone," she'd say. "I just remembered who I was." Sometimes she'd see a student struggling with a problem and tell them, "Don't think about the answer, think about the meaning." Because deep down, she knew that's what had changed her life. Not the puzzle, but what it had revealed about herself. The world can make you feel small. It can convince you that you are ordinary. But every now and then, something reminds you that brilliance doesn't belong to title, money, or degree. It belongs to those who care enough to see what others ignore. So if you ever doubt yourself, remember Elena. Remember that a woman with tired hands and an old laptop once proved the smartest man in Japan wrong, not with numbers, but with heart. Because sometimes the greatest intelligence is kindness. If this story moved you, share it with someone who's forgotten their own potential. Remind them that no dream is too far gone and no life too ordinary to shine.